Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 10th September 2020. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. Now in our weekly series of mains question assignment from the DNS, the question for today's assignment is UAE-Israel-US tripartite deal is considered as watershed moment in the global geopolitics. How do you think India can benefit from the deal? So this is a topic from the international relations and you have to answer this question in 150 words and this is for 10 marks. And this question has been created from the Daily News Simplified of 15th August 2020 from the discussion titled How Will the Israel-UAE Pact Impact the Gulf? And you can watch the discussion before writing your answers. In this regard, you need to take care of few important things before you post your answer. So in this, you can type the answer in the comment box or you can click the image of your answer in the JPG file and send your answers to us. And all those who will send their answers by Saturday will get the evaluation and feedback from the Rao's IAS teachers. Secondly, post your answers in portrait mode only. Also, you should not post your answer in somebody else's answer box. And you should use the comment or post your answer at the bottom of the thread to submit your answer to the main thread. Also, while writing the answers, try to keep a tab on the time that you have taken to write this answer. Mention the time taken for you to write the answer in your answer sheet on the top right hand side. And you can also mention the city and the state from where you are posting your answer. So in the description of today's video, there is a link for the question assignment where you can participate in the discussion on Rao's IAS eLearn platform. After this, let us start our discussion for today's newspaper. Now, this article on page number 6 talks about the use of blockchain technology in voting in Indian elections. And in this regard, the Election Commission of India has recently held an online conference in collaboration with the Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency and the IIT Madras to explore the possibility of using blockchain technology for the purpose of enabling remote elections. Now, we all know that blockchain technology is one of the emerging technologies and that is being currently used in cryptocurrency. And besides that, a lot of experimentation is going on around the usage of blockchain technology in different economic sectors. However, it is for the first time that the Election Commission of India is trying to use this blockchain technology so that remote voters can use this technology to cast their vote. Now, in this regard, the blockchain technology becomes very important for us from the General Studies paper 3 point of view in the topic Science and Technology. And for the upcoming preliminary examination, this blockchain technology becomes extremely important for us. Now, regarding the blockchain technology, we have discussed about it in detail in previous DNS videos in the context of RBI banning cryptocurrency in India. So let us revise from that video, the blockchain technology, how it works and how safe it is. And after that, we will look at the concerns that have been raised by the author in this regard regarding the use of blockchain technology in the Indian election system. So in this context, let us revise from the Daily News Simplified of 21st July 2019, where we have discussed various dimensions and advantages of using the blockchain technologies. And this news article appeared in the newspapers in the context of RBI's ban on the cryptocurrency in India. And it was in this background that a lot of companies were experimenting with the use of blockchain technology in different sectors. So let us revise from this video different aspects of blockchain technology. And at the end of it, we will look at the concerns that have been raised by the author regarding the use of blockchain technology in the Indian election system. Now, blockchain has emerged as a very important technology. And further, it has applications in various fields. And it is also very important because it is one of the most secure technology as far as the digital transactions or various ledger keeping practices are concerned. So in this article, we will try to understand what is the blockchain technology, what are its key applications, and what are the challenges or the hype about the blockchain technology. And all these aspects can be important for us from the preliminary as well as mains examination point of view. Now, the blockchain has been in news for past few years because of its application in the cryptocurrency. However, recently, as we all know that RBI banned the cryptocurrency in India. And that is why now various companies are trying to explore the areas where the blockchain technology can be used. So first in this line is, what is blockchain technology? So this simply allows designing a secure way to record transactions and circulate it among the signatories, and especially those who are connected with the internet. Further, it is an extremely democratic ledger that cannot be arbitrarily manipulated and is easily shareable. Now here we should understand that a ledger simply means a book where all the economic transactions or any other transactions are recorded. So simply blockchain is also a way of keeping economic records. However, it is not just restricted to keeping the records of economic transaction, and it has applications way beyond the economic transaction bookkeeping. So which simply means that this record of economic transactions or the ledger is not under the control of a single authority. But the control of this ledger under a blockchain is evenly distributed, and that is why the term democratic ledger has been used in the context of blockchain technology. So as it reads, it allows designing a secure way. So one of the characteristics of blockchain technology is that it is secure. And why is it secure? Because it is democratic in nature and it is circulated among the various members who become the part of the community for which the transactions are being recorded. And that is why it cannot be easily manipulated. And one of the characteristics is that it is easily shareable. So now we will try to understand all these aspects when we learn about how does this blockchain technology actually work. So blockchain is simply a chain which develops because of interconnected blocks of transactions. And each block in a blockchain is a record of transactions, as we have learned earlier. Now, what is the importance of these blocks in a blockchain? So these blocks are great and important because they provide unalterable document of history of every transaction. So since these blocks contain the record of transactions and these blocks cannot be easily altered, that is why they provide a very secure platform online. For example, in the context of cryptocurrency, these blocks in the blockchain store the place, time, value, and location of a purchase. Now, each of these blocks, which are part of the blockchain, have a unique digital signature. And every block is distinguished from the another through a unique code. And this unique code is also called as hash. And simply this hash is a string of numbers. Now, let us understand this concept by the use of some pictures. So every block is a record of transaction, and these blocks are interconnected in a chained manner, and that is why they have been termed as blockchain. And once a data is stored in a block, it becomes very difficult to change this information. Now, what all information is present in these blocks? So this block simply has data. Further, it has an identification code which is known as hash, which is a string of numbers generally. And also every block in the blockchain has a record of the previous blocks. For example, this block, which is a part of this simple blockchain, will have its own hash as well as the hash of the previous block. And that is how if you change any information in this particular block, it will be reflected in all other blocks. And that is why it becomes very difficult to change the information that is recorded in the blocks. So simply this hash is a string of numbers and it is like a unique fingerprint. And as we know that these fingerprints are unique to every person, so similarly this hash or the string of numbers is unique for every block in the blockchain. And as we have learned that every block has the hash of the previous block as well. So for example, as you can see in this block, the first block is known as the Genesis block and it does not have any previous hash. However, the second block has a hash of its own and also the hash of the previous block, as can be seen in this picture. So 1Z8F, which is the hash of first block, is also a part of the identification information of the second block. And similarly, the second block's hash information is also present in the information of the block third. So if anybody tries to change the hash information of any of the blocks, it will be reflected in all other blocks. Similarly, all these informations will be present in the subsequent blocks as well. And that is why any alteration or change in the information of a block will be reflected throughout the chain. And that is what makes it a very secure system of recording transactions. Now, what is the mechanism which makes this blockchain tamper-proof or secure in nature? So one of the mechanism or the approach is known as the proof of work mechanism. Now what is meant by this proof of work mechanism? Now let us take the example of cryptocurrency, and if a new block has to be added to the existing blockchain, it will take around 10 minutes for processing. Now as this block has been added at the end of the chain, that is why it will only take 10 minutes. However, if alteration or change is done in a block which is already a part of the chain, it will take around 10 minutes. And similarly, this change of information in all the blocks which are connected to this block will also take 10 minutes. And that is how this process will become very long enough, and that is how it discourages the tempering of the information of the blocks. So simply you should understand that adding a new block at the end of the chain is easy because it will take only 10 minutes in case of cryptocurrency. However, if alteration is done on any block which lies in between the chain, this information will have to be changed for all the subsequent blocks. And that is how the time which is required for the change of information will be prolonged. And this is because millions of blocks are connected in one single blockchain. So that is how the proof of work mechanism secures the blockchain from any alteration or change. Now, another important feature of the blockchain which makes it very secure is that it is democratic and distributed in nature. Now, simply for example, if you take the example of currency in India, Reserve Bank of India is the central authority which controls all the circulation of currency in India. So if any alteration has to be done, it has to be done with the Reserve Bank of India, which is the central authority. However, what differentiates the blockchain technology from the earlier used centralized technology is that it works on the principle of peer-to-peer network. So when one person joins this blockchain, he has full information about the whole blockchain. However, as we have learned in the case of RBI, only the RBI has all the information. However, all the banks which are connected to the RBI might not have the full information which is available with the RBI. So all the members who are connected in this peer-to-peer network have all full information of the total blockchain of which they are a part. So if someone tries to create a new block in this blockchain, this information will be sent to every one of the member who is a part of this blockchain. And each member or each node will now verify the information that is provided by this block. And only when it is verified by all the nodes which are present in the network, it will be added to the blockchain. So simply all the members or all the computer nodes in this case verify the information and build a consensus regarding the addition of new block. And that is how it becomes democratic and evenly distributed. And that is exactly the reason that such blockchains are very secure and are unalterable or changeable in nature. And also, if any person tries to change any information in this blockchain, it will be sent for verification to all other members or all other nodes in this blockchain. So if any of these members or nodes reject this addition or change in the information of blockchains, it cannot be reflected in the total blockchains. And that is how change is not easy in such blockchain networks. Now, as we have learned through the pictures that the blockchain technology is democratic and works through a peer-to-peer network where any change or any addition of the blocks is sent to all the computers or the nodes which are connected to this blockchain. So now how these computers verify such information which is provided in the new block or through a change in the blocks? So these computers verify the genuineness of a transaction by solving mathematical problems. And these mathematical problems can only be done through brute force, energy intensive ways which require a lot of computational powers and electricity. So even the verification process under a peer-to-peer network is not easy. So all these mechanisms, that is the proof of work mechanism and this peer-to-peer network verification, makes this blockchain technology very secure in nature. And that is why this technology is being looked upon positively by all the companies around the world. And it provides for widespread application of this technology in various fields. So after this, let us understand what are the potential applications of the blockchain work and where it is being presently used. Now this application part of any technology becomes particularly important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And if you go through the paper of 2018, there was a question related to the application of 3D printing technology. So similarly, you can expect a question regarding the applications of blockchain technology. Now, first and foremost, the Facebook has launched Libra, which is a kind of blockchain-backed digital currency. Further, the blockchain technology is also being tested as a replacement for paper-based and manual transaction processing, and in all areas like trade, finance, foreign exchange, cross-border settlement, and securities settlement. So it has applications in all these fields. Further, there is a startup by the name Ethereum, which is a blockchain-based startup, and it aims to decentralize all the information which is available information. So what are the likely benefits of decentralizing the information which is available online? So it claims that by decentralizing the online information, it will give users the control over their own data, and which will be different from the present scenario where all the personal data of the people who are present on the internet is stored or restricted to important multinational giants like Google and Amazon servers. And that is how it has raised the concerns of privacy regarding our data. So once this blockchain technology is applied to all the information that is available online, every person that is present on the network will be able to protect his or her information. And it will not be saved only with centralized companies like Google, Amazon, etc. Further, this blockchain technology will help in tracing the origin of the food, where it is grown. So it will give you a full chain of information regarding where the food was grown, where it was processed, where it was packaged, and what all alteration has been done in it before it comes to the market. And finally, it claims to check the menace of false news. And that is why it has applications in journalism and in fact-checking applications. Now, as we all know that false news has become a very big menace and is also a threat to the security of India as well. And majority of the cases of mob lynching and mob violence have been because of the rumors that are circulated on the social media networks. So that is why the application of blockchain in fact-checking applications become extremely important. So these are some of the fields where the application of blockchain is being tested. And that is why they are very important in nature. Now, after understanding some of the aspects of the blockchain technology, one of the important aspects for mains examination is the challenge which is posed by the use or introduction of blockchain technology. So first and foremost is that application of technology which is a path-breaking technology will prove to be disruptive. And this is because it will create new opportunities for some people and it will destroy the jobs and opportunities for some other. So this technology will be disruptive in nature and will create opportunities for some people and will also destroy for other ones. Now, similar disruption was witnessed when the internet started, and particularly the TCP or the Transmission Control Protocol or the Internet Protocol led to the foundation of email, websites, etc. So that was one of the path-breaking technology at that point of time. So similarly, blockchain is also another path-breaking technology, and that is why it will cause widespread disruption. Now, one of the most important attractiveness for the blockchain is that it aims to destroy the intermediaries like banks, courts, lawyers, etc. For example, as we have learned in the case of cryptocurrency, there will be no need for a centralized authority. This is because there will be a peer-to-peer checking network or verification network, and which will be available with everyone. So that will be a democratic authority system. And that will be different from the centralized authority system. So that is why it aims at destroying the intermediaries like banks, etc. And that is also one of the biggest challenges because all these institutions which are huge in nature, for example, the courts, lawyers, or the banks, will not allow such a technology to enter this arena. Further, various economists have theorized that blockchain has its own vulnerabilities and susceptibility to creating new hegemons, power networks, cartels, and challenges to the global energy consumption. So by this, it simply means that it will create new hegemons or powerful people or powerful organizations at the global level. And also there are chances of creation of cartels who will be a group of companies or networks who will control all the information in the blockchains. So these are some of the concerns which have been raised by the economists. And all these are important challenges to the introduction of blockchain technology. Now, after understanding the basics of the blockchain technology and where it can be used, let us look at some of the key concerns on using the blockchain technology for elections in India that has been raised by the author in this article. Now, the first concern that has been raised by the author is that the blockchain technology used in the elections in India can be open to hacking. And this has been highlighted by various security experts who warn that any internet based election system is wide open to attack and manipulation regardless of the underlying infrastructure. So, this means that the security experts are skeptical about the usage of blockchain technology, especially for elections or the democratic process of election, which is key for the democratic functioning of a country. And the issues that are associated with the online voting are all concerned with infecting the voters' computer with malware or infecting the computers in the election office that handle and count the ballots. And that is why that is a cause of concern regarding the use of blockchain technology in the Indian elections. Second is the misuse by foreign intelligence and corporates. And as we have learned regarding the blockchain technology, that it will lead to creation of new hegemons. So online technology for voting is open to manipulation and attack by foreign intelligence and corporates, as the transmission of votes through the internet conduit is subject to tampering. That is, when the votes are being transmitted through the internet, they are open to manipulation by the foreign intelligence and corporates. Further, the voting preference and the pattern of voting can become public, and that stands against the principle of secret ballot, that is the basis of representative democracy. So one of the problem with using the blockchain technology is that it is assumed that there is no malware or virus in the voter's computer or mobile. And if the system is altogether hacked, the voting behavior of everyone will be in public sphere. And that will stand against the democratic principle of secret ballot that is used in all elections across globe, including India. Now the fourth concern is regarding the chances of impersonation of voters. And we have learned that the blockchain technology relies on proper implementation of the cryptographic protocols. And if there are shortcomings in the implementation of these cryptographic protocols, it might lead to opening up of the identity and the voting preferences of the electors. Further, it may also allow an individual to cast a vote as someone else. That is, it will amount to impersonation regarding the identity of some other voter. So, for example, if a person has voted for party Z, the vote would eventually go to the party Y. So, there are high chances of manipulation if the cryptographic protocols on which the blockchain technology relies are not implemented properly. Further, a report was published regarding the use of online voting in the Russian elections. And in Russia, during the voting on the constitutional amendment that was proposed by Russian President Vladimir Putin, various citizens were able to cast their vote online. However, while the voting process was underway, the Russian media outlets had reported that it was possible to access and decrypt the votes that are stored in the blockchain due to a flaw in cryptographic implementation. And this information that was accessed because of flaws in the cryptographic implementation would have been used to unmask the votes cast by the electors. That is, the identity of the voters might not have been kept secret because of such flaws. Further, it has been proposed that even in the remote voting system, the voters will have to be physically present at the voting booth, and their identity will be identified by using biometric authentication. However, the author is skeptical that the requirement of physical presence and biometric authentication may not necessarily make a remote voting system invulnerable to attacks. And that is because an attacker may be able to clone the biometric attributes required for authenticating as another individual and cast a vote on their behalf. That is, their biometric identity can be hacked. And physical implants or softwares that are used or placed on an individual system could allow the attackers to collect and deduce the voting choices of these individuals. So there are serious concerns regarding the cloning of the biometric authentication and misusing it in identifying the voting behavior of the public. Further, there are concerns that it will disenfranchise a lot of sections of the society, and they can include vulnerable communities, individuals, and tribal societies. And that can be possibly due to flaws in the interdependent platforms, flaws in system designs, as well as general failures which are caused by external factors or purposefully designed failures to exclude them from voting. That is, technology can be purposefully used by designing systems that will exclude certain sections of the society and that will disenfranchise that section of the society and they will not be able to cast the vote. So these are some of the concerns that have been raised by author regarding the use of blockchain technology in the Indian election system. Further, it has been said that the use of technology does not guarantee safety in the elections. So it is important to emphasize that digitization in itself does not make the processes more robust, and any solution to electoral problems must be software independent and fault tolerable, where failure or tampering of one mechanism or several mechanisms would not affect the integrity or the transparency of the overall electoral process. So, in this regard, the author says that even if the Election Commission is able to design a system which is attack and tamper proof, use of such a system could perhaps only be justified for lower level elections, and they cannot be justified for something as significant and politically binding as the general Lok Sabha elections. So, these are the various aspects of the blockchain technology, their use in the Indian election system, and the concerns that are associated by this use. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 7 talks about redefining the definition of a farmer. And in this context, this article highlights that there is ambiguity regarding the definition of farmer in India. Now, as there is ambiguity regarding the definition of a farmer in India, this has serious implications for the design of various agricultural schemes in India. So, in this regard, let us look at what is the current definition of a farmer that is being used by the government of India. Also, what are the problems that are associated with such a definition. And after that, let us look at what can be done to change the definition of farmers so that the benefits reach each and every person who is involved in the agricultural activities. And this can be a particularly important aspect for us from General Studies paper 3 point of view under the topic economic development. Now, looking at the central government's definition of a farmer, there are multiple definitions of a farmer in the official data that is published by the government of India. And in this, the population census defines a cultivator as a person who is engaged in cultivation of land either owned or held in kind or share. Further, the 59th round of situation assessment survey of the farmers, which is conducted by the NSSO, stresses upon the possession of land either owned or leased or otherwise possessed for defining farmers. That is, the possession of the land or leasing of the land becomes an important criteria for defining as to who constitutes a farmer in India. And this is the process that is being used by different agencies of the central government. Now, the criteria of possessing a land or leasing a land or sharing a land is problematic in nature. Now, such definitions are exclusionary, discriminatory, and unfair. And such narrow and exclusionary definitions of the farmer, which uses possession of the land as one of the most important criteria for defining a farmer, can have negative implications on the design of various agricultural schemes. Now, for example, the PM Kisan scheme provides income support only to the land owning families in the agricultural sector. And as such, a narrow definition fails to include the agricultural laborers, tenants, sharecroppers, women farmers as beneficiaries under these schemes. And a proper definition of the farmers is important because, according to the census of 2011, there are about 11.8 crore cultivators while there are 14 crore agriculture workers. So in this we note that large number of farmers lease their land informally. However, they are not recognized as farmers by the Government of India for the purpose of benefits under various schemes for the agricultural sector. Also, such definitions do not include other categories of people who are involved in agriculture. For example, they do not include the sharecroppers, agricultural laborers, tenant farmers, etc. Further, we note that in Indian agriculture, there is a trend of growing feminization of Indian agriculture. And that is mainly because the male members of the agricultural families migrate to the urban areas for grabbing opportunities. And that is why a lot of women work in the agriculture sector. And that has been famously called as the growing feminization of the Indian agriculture. Now, in this background, very rarely are the lands registered in the names of the women. And due to this, the women who are working in the agriculture sector do not get benefits of the various government schemes. Further, the most critical issue here is that the support is not extended to the tenant farmers and the sharecroppers who bear the maximum risk in agriculture sector. So in this background, let us look at a suggestion that was provided by MS Swaminathan for redefining the farmers in India. So the National Commission on Farmers, which was headed by MS Swaminathan, has given a clear, unambiguous and comprehensive definition of farmers in India. And under this definition, almost everyone involved in the agriculture related activity should be considered as a farmer. And this will include all kinds of people who are involved, for example, the operational landholders, cultivators, agricultural laborers, sharecroppers, tenants, non-corporate planters, plantation laborers, and people who are involved in allied activities as well. For example, people who are involved in livestock rearing, sericulture, agroforestry, etc. So this looks like a comprehensive and broad-based definition of a farmer in India. And it will also include the tribal families that are engaged in shifting cultivation and collection of minor forest produce. So this will not leave out any person who is involved in the agricultural activities, and as such, in the design of the policies related to the agriculture sectors, this will benefit each and every person who are adversely impacted because of this narrow definition of the farmer. So these were few aspects regarding the redefinition of farmers in India. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now this article on page number 7 talks about the BT cotton. And in this, the author has said that a lot of agricultural scientists have proposed that the genetically modified BT technology has been a panacea for all the problems in the agriculture sector. And in this regard, she says that the benefits of introduction of BT cotton in India have been modest and short-lived in nature. And the increasing yields in the cotton sector in India have been wrongly attributed to the BT technology. Now in this regard, for our preliminary examination, what is important for us is to know about the BT cotton and also about a new variety of BT cotton that has been in news continuously for the past 1 year. And that is known as the HTBT cotton, which is an improvement over the existing BT cotton variety. So that can be important for us from the environment point of view in the preliminary examination syllabus. So let us look at that. Now the genetically modified crops are one of the important areas in the preliminary examination. And as you can see, in the year 2011 and 2012, 3 questions have been asked related to BT brinjal and the genetically engineered plants. So this question that was asked in 2011 reads, a genetically engineered form of brinjal known as BT brinjal has been developed. The objective of this is. So basically this question was related to the objective of creating this genetically engineered form of brinjal. So the correct answer here was to make it pest resistant. Again, this question that was asked in 2012 read, other than resistance to the pests, what are the prospects for which genetically engineered plants have been created? First is that to enable them to withstand drought, to increase the nutritive value of produce, to enable them to grow and do photosynthesis in spaceships and space stations, and to increase their shelf life. So in this, you can easily eliminate the third statement, which looks vague in nature. And the correct answer that comes out is C, that is 1, 2 and 4 only. So as you can see, the question was asked about the advantages of introduction of this new kind of genetically engineered plants. So this debate kind of thing can also be asked in your preliminary examination in a particular way. And this is one of the ways in which UPSC has asked the advantages of using the genetically engineered plants. Again, this question that was asked in 2012 was regarding the resistance to the introduction of BT brinjal in India. And the statements that are given include the BT brinjal has been created by inserting a gene from a soil fungus into its genome. Second is that the seeds of BT brinjal are terminated seeds and therefore the farmers have to buy the seeds before every season from the seed companies. Third is that there is an apprehension that consumption of BT brinjal may have adverse impact on health, and there is some concern that introduction of BT brinjal may have adverse effect on the biodiversity. So in this regard, the correct answer was C, that is 3 and 4 only, because there was apprehension about adverse impact on health and on biodiversity in the year 2012 when this question was asked. So we have seen that genetically modified plants or genetically engineered plants are one of the important areas in the preliminary examination. And accordingly, the BT cotton and this new variety of BT cotton that has been introduced becomes very important for us from the upcoming preliminary examination point of view. So regarding BT cotton, it was created by adding genes which are derived from the soil bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, and it produces over 200 different toxins which are harmful to different insects. And in this regard, you might be knowing that cotton which was grown in India was highly vulnerable to pest attack. And that is why this introduction of BT cotton has been helpful in creating pest resistant cotton variety. And when certain kind of insects attack these BT cotton plants, they get killed. So accordingly, this was one of the improvements over the existing variety of cotton that was grown in India. Now, what was the benefit of introducing such a pest-resistant crop variety? Further, another benefit of introducing the pest-resistant cotton is that it has helped in doing away with the use of broad-spectrum insecticides. That is, it has minimized the use of insecticides in the cotton plantations. Now, these insecticides were adversely impacting some of the natural insect predators that are present in the farm. And another benefit of using the BT cotton was that it reduced the use of pesticides and it prevented the agricultural runoff from polluting rivers and the food chain. And we note that insecticides which are sprayed in the farms enter into our food chain through the runoff into the rivers. Now, in this regard, although the problem of pesticide was solved to an extent by the introduction of BT cotton, the issue of weeds still remained in the cotton fields. And in this regard, this HTBT variety has been added as another genetic modification to the BT cotton crop. And this makes the crop resistant to various commonly used herbicides. Now, the normal variety of BT cotton is not resistant to the herbicides that are sprayed. And accordingly, the farmers are forced to handpick the weeds that are present in the farm. Now, after the introduction of these HTBT cottons, when the herbicides will be sprayed in the farms, the weeds will only get killed and this herbicide will not adversely impact the crop that is standing in the farm. So this HTBT plant allows the farmers to spray herbicides to get rid of the parasitic weeds in the farm without harming the main cotton crop. And using this variety could save the farmers from having to put in extra labor in pulling out weeds, which deprive the cotton plants of vital nutrients and reduce their yields. So basically, the cost of pulling out the weeds will also be reduced in the farms. However, there are various concerns that have been raised regarding the use of HTBT cotton. Now, one of the concerns is that herbicide tolerance can easily spread through pollination in different weeds. And when this tolerance is created in the weeds, it will give rise to a variety of weeds which are known as super weeds, and these are resistant to existing herbicides that are present. And this can create a situation that would be similar to the one that is being witnessed today in the form of antibiotic resistance, and that has been because of misuse of over-the-counter antibiotics. So accordingly, if the HTBT cotton is introduced and the cotton crop is resistant to the herbicides, then the farmers will use herbicides more often and in large quantity. And due to the overuse of herbicides in the farms for killing the weeds, it can give rise to super weeds. So that is one of the important concerns regarding the use of HTBT cotton, and there has been a lot of debate regarding the HTBT cotton in India in the past 1 year. And that is why it becomes very important for us from the upcoming preliminary examination point of view. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 11 reads that the defense exports from India have increased to 700% in 3 years. And this has been said by Chief of Defense Staff General Bipin Rawat. So currently the defense exports have increased from rupees 1521 crores in 2016 and 17 to 10,745 crores in 2018 and 19. And this is an all-time high in terms of exports of defense equipments. Also, India stands at 19th in the list of defense exporters in 2019. Further, India aims to achieve a manufacturing turnover in the defense of about $25 billion or about 1,75,000 crores, and it will include exports of $5 billion in aerospace and defense goods services by 2025. And in this regard, the ministry had issued a draft Defense Production and Export Promotion Policy 2020. And accordingly, this topic becomes very important for us from General Studies Paper 3 point of view in the topic indigenization of technology. So what we'll do is that we'll look at the various steps that have been taken by the Government of India to increase the domestic production of defense equipments. And currently, you should note that India is the third largest spender on defense around the world. Further, India is the only net importer of defense equipments, and India accounts for about 9.2% of the global arms imports. So this means that India was severely lacking in terms of domestic production of defense equipments because it relied mainly on the global arms imports. So in this regard, the Government of India has announced various steps to boost the domestic defense manufacturing. So one of the important steps was the incentives that were introduced under the foreign trade policy. And in this, a line of credit for the foreign countries to import defense products was provided. Also, where it was feasible, the defense exports can also be financed through the Exim Banks, which is the Export-Import Bank of India. Also, it is said that the defense attaches in the Indian missions in different countries were empowered to promote defense exports, and it strengthened defense diplomacy also. Further, defense production in India is led by the ordnance factories and the defense public sector undertakings or enterprises, and they have played a huge role in making our country a defense manufacturing hub. Second was the announcement of Innovations for Defense Excellence or IDEX, and it aimed at creation of an ecosystem to foster innovation and technology development in defense and aerospace. Further, it aims at engaging industries which include the MSMEs, startups, individual innovators, R&D institutes and academia, and provides them grants or funding and other support to carry out research and development which has the potential for future adoption for Indian defense and aerospace needs. So this is a much needed boost for creating an ecosystem for innovation and research and development in the defense sector. And it aims at engaging various stakeholders in the defense production and also supports them financially. Third important step was the foreign direct investment in the defense sector. And in this, the foreign direct investment is allowed under the automatic route up to 49%. And beyond 49%, the FDI can be done through the government route, that is after the approval of the government, and it cannot be done automatically. And this is supposed to increase the access to modern technology in the defense production. Further, recently in the month of May, the FDI through the automatic route has further been raised from 49% to 74%. And this announcement was done by the Finance Minister of India and has got the cabinet approval as well. So this shows that India is keen on acquiring modern defense technology through the route of FDI. Further, the Government of India had notified a policy for indigenization of components and spare parts that are used in defense platforms. Now we note that as India is one of the important importers of the defense equipments, it is also dependent upon the components and the spare parts on imports. So in this regard, India has announced the policy of indigenization of these components and the spare parts. And this policy was announced with the objective of creating an industry ecosystem which will help in indigenizing the imported components and also sub-assemblies for the defense equipments. Further, a new framework has been announced that is titled as Mission Raksha Gyan Shakti, and it aims at improving or boosting the intellectual property rights culture in the indigenous defense industry. Also, the Government of India has set up a technology development fund, and it aims at encouraging the participation of public and private industries and especially the MSMEs. And this is being done through the provisions of grants, and it aims at creating an ecosystem for enhancing cutting-edge technology capabilities for defense applications. Further, in the Defense Procurement Procedure 2016, a new category of procurement has been announced. And this is known as the Indian IDDM, that is indigenously designed, developed and manufactured products. And this has been introduced in the Defense Procurement Policy of 2016 to promote indigenous designs and development of defense equipments. And finally, the MAKE procedure has been simplified with the provisions for funding of 90% of the development cost by the government to Indian industry. And it reserves projects not exceeding development cost of rupees 10 crores and 3 crores for the MSF. That is, sufficient provisions have been made for financing the development of defense industry in India. So these are few important initiatives that have been taken by the Government of India for boosting and improving the domestic production of defense equipments. And this has been a major reason why India has been able to increase its defense exports. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now let us look at next few articles which are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. In this regard, the first article is on page number 6 and it is about the digital divide and it is titled as Digital Disconnect. Now in this regard, the recent report of the NSO's survey of household social consumption on education in India for July 2017 and June 2018 highlights the poor state of computer and internet access in several states in India. And this survey highlights the digital divide that exists in India. And in this regard, the editorial says that poor access to the internet in many states must be bridged urgently to help the e-learners. Now, what is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view are the ranking of India in various important indices that are related to the access to internet. So in this, the first is the Economic Intelligence Unit's Inclusive Internet Index 2020, and in this, India is ranked at 46. Further, India has been ranked at 122 amongst the 215 countries in terms of internet users. And this was highlighted in the report that is released by International Telecom Union. And in World Economic Forum's Networked Readiness Index, India was ranked at 91st. Now, if you go through the previous year question papers of the preliminary examination, you will find that a lot of questions have been asked regarding the indices that are released by World Economic Forum. And accordingly, these indices also become important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And in this, particularly important is the organization or the body that releases these indexes. So for example, the Network Readiness Index is released by World Economic Forum. And the Inclusive Internet Index is released by the Economist magazine's Intelligence Unit. Further, the next article is on page number 11 and it is related to one of the new announcement of the Government of India, that is the PM Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi or the PM Swanidhi, and it is a special microcredit facility for street vendors. So what is this scheme about? So it is a central sector scheme to facilitate street vendors to access affordable working capital loan for resuming their livelihood activities after the easing of lockdown due to COVID-19. Further, the nodal ministry is the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The rationale behind the scheme is that the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns have adversely impacted the livelihoods of street vendors. And the credit for working capital to the street vendors will be helpful for them to resume their livelihood. Now, what are the objectives? So the objective is to facilitate working capital loan up to Rs 10,000 at subsidized rate of interest. Further, it also aims at incentivizing regular repayment of loan and to reward the digital transactions. Further, the salient features of the scheme include initial working capital of up to Rs 10,000, interest subsidy on timely or early repayment at 7%, monthly cashback incentive on digital transactions, and higher loan eligibility on timely repayment of the first loan. Beneficiaries include the street vendors or hawkers who are vending in the urban areas as on or before March 24, 2020. And it will also include the vendors of surrounding peri-urban or the rural areas. Now, regarding the definition of street vendor or hawkers, these are any person who is engaged in vending of articles, goods, wares, etc. and offering services to the public in a street, footpath, pavement, etc. And the goods supplied by them include vegetables, fruits, ready-to-eat street food, tea, pakoras, etc. Further, which lending institution will provide the credit? So it will be the scheduled commercial banks, the regional rural banks, small finance banks, cooperative banks, NBFCs, as well as the self-help group banks. That is, all kind of banks will be providing the benefits under the PM Swanidhi. And what is the tenure of this scheme? So the tenure of the scheme is that it will be implemented up to March 2022. So this scheme, that is the PM Swanidhi, becomes very important for us from the upcoming preliminary examination point of view. Further, the next important article from our preliminary examination point of view is the Indo-Pacific Trilateral Dialogue that was held yesterday. And it was the first ever senior officials' Indo-France-Australia Trilateral Dialogue on the Indo-Pacific region. So the focus of this India-France-Australia Trilateral Dialogue was on enhancing the cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region, and this can be an important aspect for us from preliminary examination. So in this, the three countries discussed the economic and geostrategic challenges and cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. Further, the three countries discussed about cooperation on marine global commons and potential areas for practical cooperation. And this will include regional organizations such as the ASEAN, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, and the Indian Ocean Commission. So accordingly, the Indian Ocean Commission also becomes important for us from the preliminary examination. Further, the countries had an exchange on the priorities, challenges, and trends in the regional and global multilateral institutions. And they focused on the best ways to strengthen and reform multilateralism. Further, this meeting was held with the objective of building on the strong bilateral relations that these three countries share with each other and also synergizing their respective strengths to ensure a peaceful, secure, prosperous, and rule based Indo Pacific region. And it was also decided that the three countries will hold the dialogue on an annual basis. So, as this dialogue has been held for the first time, it becomes very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And also, the Ministry of External Affairs has mentioned that during this discussion, the regional organizations like ASEAN, Indian Ocean Rim Association, and Indian Ocean Commission were also highlighted, and that is why they become important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So these were the three important articles for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So with this, we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.